Yu-Gi-Oh is a very expensive game, especially in this format, but it does not have to be. So here I have brought 5 different budget decks, all below the price point of about $100. So not especially the cheapest. However, they are at a price point where all the decks I need to be showing are quite competent and can definitely hold their own in the current competitive landscape. Now, I'm not going to be claiming that these decks are amazing by any stretch of the imagination, or that they're necessarily top tier. However, what I am saying is you can take them to locals and you can definitely get a win or two, or even top the locals with the list that I am providing.
Alrighty guys, now that we are in here with the first deck, here is Traptrix. Now this deck is fairly cheap because I got a structure deck somewhat frequently. I want to say somewhat frequently, but I think it's been like about 1 or 2 years at this point. But a lot of the cards in the structure are very cheap. So a lot of the price from this deck actually just comes from generic staple cards, which we were able to include a lot of because of the cheap price of the Traptrix cards. Traptrix is basically just a control deck where a lot of the monsters are unaffected by hold trap cards, and then all the extra deck monsters are unaffected by trap cards, period. So we're able to utilize cards like Torrential Tribute in this deck. But that's enough yapping about the overall deck profile. Let's talk about the card by card. Starting off, we're on Triple Mimighoul. On normal, it adds a whole normal trap from our deck to our hand, and on special, mandatory will trigger to target a spell trap our opponent controls and destroy it, even if they don't have any. So this is one way we can trigger our Sarah on turn 1. We're also on 2 copies of Traptrix Pudica. It's unaffected by whole normal traps. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. When it's normal summon, we can add a Traptrix Garden from our deck to our hand, and if it's special summon, we can target a special summon monster our opponent controls, banish it, and then during the next standby phase, our opponent can special summon one of their banished monsters. Not quite Farfa, because it doesn't banish and then return, it banishes and then they can special summon any of their banished monsters, which can be either a good or a bad thing. Most of the time, though, it is a bad thing, so that effect is like, only use it if you really gotta, but it is a very useful effect for removing problematic cards from the board, so we are still playing 2 of this card. Another card we're playing 2 of is Traptrix Dionea. On normal summon, we can target a Traptrix in our graveyard and special summon that in defense position, and when this card is special, we can target a whole normal trap in our graveyard, set that target, but banish it during the end phase of our next turn if it's still on the field. We can always return that card that we set to our hand, so we do not have to worry about it being banished, although typically we are going to be utilizing it regardless. Next up, we're on 2 copies of Traptrix Arachnocampa. Of course, it's unaffected by whole normal traps. The first time each set card in your spell and trap zone would be destroyed by a card effect each turn, it is not destroyed. Really good for cards like Duster and Lightning Storm. During the main phase, if you control a Traptrix monster, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand, and we cannot special summon monsters the rest of the turn from the extra deck except for insects and plants, so it is a way to lock us, especially out of cards like Zeus, Silhouette, Rabbit, SP, Little Knight, and Access Code Talker. And we can only use each effect of Arachnocampa once per turn. This is a free special summon. It protects our back row. It's searchable, so we don't need to be playing too many, but if we do open it, it is not the worst thing in the world, because it just means we don't have to search this specific card, so we are playing 2 of this card, because it's very strong. If you wanted to go more of like an extender route, I can see you running 3 of this card, but I can even see you running only 1, because of course it is searchable. And then for our last Traptrix main deck monster, we are on double copies of Traptrix Mantis. Of course, it's unaffected by whole normal traps. When it's normal summon, we can add a Traptrix monster from our deck to our hand, like Arachnocampa. And then once per turn, quick effect, we can target 1 set spell and trap card we control, return that target to our hand, then we can set a spell and trap from our hand. And this is the way we can reset that card that we set with our Dionea effect in order to make sure that it will not be banished. But that's it for our monsters. Now let's get on to our spells. We're on 1 copy of Traptrix Garden. During our main phase, we can additional normal summon a Traptrix monster. The first time each insect and plant monster we control be destroyed by battle each turn. It is not very similar to Dragonic Diagram. And then we can banish 1 monster we control to special summon a Traptrix monster from our hand or our graveyard. We can use each effect of Traptrix Garden once per turn. Very powerful card. We're only playing 1 because of course it is searchable off of our normal summon of Pudica. It also gives us an additional normal summon, so we're not locked out of effects like Mimighoul, Dionea, and our Mantis. We're also on one copy of Trap Tantalizing Tune. You can always play more of this card if you would like to. I am personally opting to play more of a trap heavy and non-engine heavy build, so I am only opting to play the one copy. But this card reads, discard one level 4 insect or plant monster or one normal trap to draw 2 cards. We can banish this card from our graveyard, target one of our banished level 4 insect or plant monsters or normal traps, place it on the bottom of the deck, and then you can only use each of the effect of Trap Tantalizing Tune once per turn. Very powerful card. It's just neutral card advantage when from hand, and it's a great way to recur our resources that we might consider them to be gone. So we are just playing the one copy because this is a normal spell card, so this is the thrust target. For another normal spell, we're also on one Pot of Prosperity to dig deep into our deck, and now let's get into our Trap Hole cards. We're on one Traptrix Holitea. We can activate this card to turn its set by discarding a normal trap. Special summon this card in defense position as a normal monster. Plant Earth level 4, attack 400, defense 24, has a big butt. And then you can banish this card from our graveyard, target one Traptrix monster in our graveyard, and special summon it. We can use one Holitea effect per turn and only once that turn. Very similar to Trickstar Reincarnation, but it's very powerful in this deck since we can activate it immediately and immediately trigger our Sarah on turn 1 instead of having to rely on cards like Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine. So we are, of course, playing 3 copies of this card, and it does allow Mimighoul to become a very powerful card because you just go normal Mimighoul, search Holitea, use Mimighoul to go to Sarah, and then activate our Holitea in order to trigger our Sarah, and we'll get to Sarah once we get to her, of course. For other trap holes, we're on one Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare. When a monster is special summoned this turn, activates effect, negate the effect if you destroy the card. Void Trap Hole, when your opponent special summons a monster with 2,000 or more attack, negate the effects of one of those monsters with 2,000 or more attack, and if you do, destroy it. Floodgate Trap Hole, we're on 2 copies of because this card's quite good in the meta right now with Ryzeal and Malice being very prevalent. It's a great way to shut off both XCs and Link plays. When your opponent special summons a monster, change that monster/monsters to face down defense position. Monsters changed to face down defense position by this effect cannot change their battle positions, meaning the only way for them to get flipped up is if we run into them instead of our opponent, flipping them to attack, of course. So we're the one who gets to dictate the pace of those monsters. And then, of course, we're on one copy of Bottomless Trap Hole. Not very great against Malice. I would recommend siding this out against that deck specifically, as well as maybe a card like Void Trap Hole, because it does have to do with attack specifically, so we can't stop any of the small Malices. We're on one copy of Time Space Trap Hole. When your opponent's special summons a monster from their hand or their extra deck, shuffle that monster into the deck, then lose 1,000 life points for each returned monster. Very powerful card since it does shuffle back into deck. And then one copy of Terrifying Trap Hole Nightmare and one copy of Network Trap Hole. When your opponent special summons a monster from their main or their graveyard, banish it face down. Face down banishing is the best way to be removing cards, so this is a very fantastic card to have access to with this deck. You can see, obviously, we're on triple copies of Torrential Tribute, and then for our generics, we're on triple copies of Triple Tactics Thrust, one copy of Talents, one copy of Call by the Grave, triple copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, triple copies of Infinite Impermanence, and one copies of Angel Statue Azaroon. In our extra deck, we're on triple copies of Traptrix Sarah. This is one of the best cards in the entire deck. This card reads, needs one non-link Traptrix monster. This link summon card is unaffected by trap effects. All the Traptrix extract monsters will have that line of text on it. You can only use each of the following effects of Sarah once per turn and not during the damage step. If a normal trap card is activated, you can special summon one Traptrix monster from your deck with a different name than the cards you control. And if your other Traptrix monster's effect is activated, you can set one hold normal trap directly from your deck. Very powerful. This is why I was mentioning with our Mimighoul, because it will always be triggering if you special summon it. If you summon it off of Sarah, we get to set any hold trap straight out of our deck, plus replace our Mimighoul that we used in order to make the Sarah. So we're on triple copies of Sarah just to make sure we're always going to have access to it at all points in the game. One copy of Cularia. It's unaffected by trap cards, of course. Once per turn, after you activate a whole normal trap, you can set it instead of sending it to the graveyard. And during your end phase, you can target one Traptrix monster in your graveyard and special summon it in defense position. Really good for the grind game. It doesn't really come up too frequently, but when it does come up, you typically are going to be winning that game. And then our last Traptrix link is one copy of Traptrix Adipus. It needs 2+ monsters, including an insect or a plant. Unaffected by traps, all Traptrix monsters you control gain 1,000 attack while you have a normal trap in your graveyard. Once per turn, you can target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of insect and plant monsters you control. Negate their effects until the end of the turn. Then you can apply this effect, banish one normal trap from your graveyard, and if you do, destroy one of those targeted face-up cards. Very powerful card, really great for ending the game, both with the attacking game and the negation and pop. Just a fantastic card, and it's one of the better new cards that was given to the archetype. Onto our Xyz cards, we're on double copies of Traptrix Alumeris. It needs 2+ level 4s, unaffected by traps while as materials. You use the following effects of Alumeris once per turn. You can attach 2 materials from this card to special summon 1 level 4 insect or plant monster from our graveyard. If an opponent's monster leaves the field because of your card effect and is now in the graveyard or banished, you can attach 1 material from this card to target one of them and special summon it to your field. Really powerful card. It's a way to get cards out of your opponent's banished, specifically with cards like Traptrix Putica, so we're able to just grab back functionally anything. We're also on double copies of Traptrix Mimighoul. It needs 2 level 4 monsters. While this card's material is unaffected by trap cards and the activated effects of other monsters with the same type as this card's material. We'll get to that in a moment. And we can lose each of the following effects of Mimighoul once per turn. You can target 1 material from this card, add 1 Traptrix monster from your deck to your hand. If a monster owned by your opponent is sent to the graveyard or banished by a card effect, except during the damage step, you can attach 1 of those monsters to this card as material, basically allowing you to customize this card by both stealing materials from your opponent's graveyard, like, I don't know, for example, the Fiendsmith or a Fabled Lurie, or something along that line, pray tell. Maybe even an aggregator of some sort, and basically make this card immune to all the rest of the cards our opponent will control of that type. So that is why we're playing 2 of it, and this is a very powerful card to be going into on our turn 1, specifically because it does also add us that Traptrix monster, preferably, of course, Arachnocampa, because it is a free special. And then lastly, for our Xyz that are Traptrix reliant, are 2 copies of Traptrix Rafflesia. It needs 2 level 4 monsters, unaffected by trap cards, while as material. Traptrix monsters you control, except for Rafflesia, cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Your opponent cannot target Traptrix monsters you control, except for Rafflesia, with card effects. Once per turn, quick effect, you can attach 1 material from this card and send 1 whole normal trap card that meets its activation condition from your deck to the graveyard. This effect becomes that trap card's effect while that card is activated. Very powerful effect. This card was seen a little bit of play in Salamangreat back in like 2021 when Gravedigger's Trap Hole was first released, which is a card you will notice is not in this list. That is one of our flex spots. If you wanted to include it, I would, of course, let you know that if you wanted to include that card, you should either cut Bottomless or Void Trap Hole to include it. I am just choosing not to include it in this build, just for personal preference. But Rafflesia is very good because it functionally acts as any one of your trap holes that is currently in your deck while it is face up on your side of the field, and it protects all your Traptrix. For our generics, we're on 1 copy of Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder because we are an Xyz archetype, 1 copy of Silhouette Rabbit as an option to pivot into when we are going first, 1 copy of SP Little Knight, of course, one of the best generic cards in the format, and 1 copy of Access Code Talker to assist with cleaning up messy board states. That's it for our main and extra. You will actually notice the price over here is a little bit different, and now in these videos I am going to make a slight change where I'm also going to be suggesting some upgrades for these decks. Specifically for Traptrix, upgrades for this deck that are fantastic is Dominus Purge specifically. We can only activate this card if, functionally, if we don't have any dark, water, and fire monsters in our deck, because we're unable to activate them for the rest of the duel if we do activate this card from our hand. And it reads, if your opponent controls a card, you can activate this card from your hand. When a card or effect is activated that includes an effect that adds a card from the deck to the hand, negate that effect, and then if you have a trap card in your graveyard, destroy that card. If you have activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of dark, water, and fire monsters for the rest of this duel, and you can use 1 Dominus Purge per turn. Very, very powerful card. We're a deck that primarily consists of earth monsters. We do have cards that are in those attribute range, specifically Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, SP Little Knight, and Access Code Talker. However, typically we can pick and choose what we are able to do, and since those are extra deck cards, these are cards of course we can banish off of Pot of Prosperity if we know we're definitely not going to be using them. The main downside, of course, is that we're not going to be able to use Ash Blossom for the rest of the game. However, this card is functionally just another copy of Ash Blossom, so it could even be reasonable to replace Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring with Dominus Purge. And then the other card that I want to suggest to add to this deck in order to increase the ceiling a little bit would be Superstar Slayer Typhon Sky Crisis in order to make going second a little bit easier. These cards, however, are quite expensive. You can see they add up to about $120, give or take. Of course, this isn't 100% accurate, but it is a little bit of a price hike in order to make this deck a little bit better. So just to show you all that the deck is under 100 or around that price point, it's about $89.35, of course, give or take, without those cards included. But that's me about it for this specific list. Now let's move on to our next one. Alrighty, it's time to get a little bit spooky because our second deck that I'm bringing here is going to be Mimighoul. This deck is quite budget now. Well, I say quite budget. It is, again, pushing that limit a little bit in order to stay competitive, but we are able to include a lot of hand traps, as you are seeing right here. This is a deck that basically revolves around giving your opponent your flip monsters and then flipping them up and down and restricting them with floodgates. So we are going to be utilizing that to the best of our ability. So that's enough yapping. Let's get into the deck profile. Starting off with triple Mimighoul Dragon. Flip if it's the main phase, apply these effects in sequence. Destroy all face-up monsters you control except for Mimighouls, and then give control of this card to your opponent. We're ideally going to be giving our opponent is going to be triggering that flip effect and triggering all these flip effects, so keep that in mind. And then during our main phase, you can special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's side of the field face down defense position. If this card is normal or a special summon, you can add one Mimighoul spell or trap from our deck to our hand. We'll use each effective dragon once per turn. We're playing 3 copies of this card because on normal and special, it adds a spell or a trap from our deck to our hand, which is amazing. We're also on triple copies of Mimighoul Archfiend. Flip if it's the main phase, apply these effects in sequence. Your opponent draws 1 card. We have to send 1 card from our hand to the graveyard and give control of this card to your opponent. Again, the person who's applying those effects is going to be our opponent. So how this is going to be working in game is we're going to be drawing 1 card. Our opponent's going to have to send 1 card from their hand to the graveyard, and then we get the Archfiend back. During our main phase, we can special summon this card from our hand to our opponent's field in face down defense position. I believe all the Mimighouls are going to have that effect except for Master. And if this card is normal or special summon, we can target 1 face down monster on the field and change it to face up attack or defense position. We can use each effect of Mimighoul Archfiend once per turn. This card used to not be the best in the old Mimighoul versions. Dragon was by far the best. However, this card has become a lot better since of the new line of support, which gave us Slime, Fairy, and Armor. So our opponents are going to be having monsters on their side of the field a lot more frequently. So we're going to be able to get that effect off a lot more. So we are playing a triple copies of Mimighoul Archfiend. It also has a pretty alright effect. It's not the best to give our opponent a targeted send from their hand to the graveyard, although we do still get a draw, so it's not the worst thing in the world. We're also on 2 copies of Mimighoul Slime. The flip effects are your opponent can special summon a Mimighoul from their deck to the field, and then we give control of this card to our opponent. So this card is just an E-Telly when it flips up for us on our opponent's side of the field. And during our main phase, we can special summon this from our hand on our opponent's side of the field in defense position. And if our opponent controls more monsters than we do, we can special summon this card face up on our field, and we can only use each effect of Slime once per turn. Very powerful card. Speaking of a powerful card, next up we're on Mimighoul Fairy. This card reads, flip during the main phase, we can apply these effects in sequence. This turn, your opponents cannot activate the effects of monsters special summon from their hand, and then we give control of this card to our opponent. This works in the way where if our opponent flips up, they can't use monster effects. Monsters that they special summon from their hand cannot activate their effects anymore, and then we get this card back, of course. And during our main phase, we can special summon this card from our hand to our opponent's field in face down defense position. Or if we control a Mimighoul monster, we can special summon this card face up on our side of the field. So it's just an extender if we do control Mimighoul, which is fantastic. The restriction is a little bit situational and is only good against certain decks. Really good against decks like Kashtira. However, it is, again, situational at best, so we are only playing 2 copies of it. We're on 1 copy of Mimighoul Armor. Flip is in the main phase, apply these effects in sequence. This turn, Mimighoul monsters cannot be destroyed by battle, and then give the control of this card to our opponent. And then during our main phase, we can special summon this card from our hand to our opponent's side of the field in face down defense position. Or if our opponent controls a monster, we can special summon this card face up on our side of the field. Makes the deck a little bit better going first. Not going first, going second, because we are able to do, like, it's a Cyber Dragon if they have a monster functionally, as well as it's like a okay effect having your Mimighouls be immune by battle. It's not the best, unfortunately, but it's not the worst, since a lot of our Mimighouls, again, are super small, like Fairies of 100, 100, 400, 500, 500, 2000. A lot of our cards are a little bit of weenies, so they're not actually really all that great stat-wise. And then our last card, main deck monster rather, is going to be Mimighoul Master. Cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects while your opponent controls any face down monsters, or you control a Mimighoul monster other than Master. You can use the following effects of Master once per turn. If this card is normal or special summon, we can add one Mimighoul monster from our deck or our deck to our hand, except for Master. During our opponent's main phase, quick effect, we can change one face down monster on the field to face up, attack, or defense position. We're only playing one copy of this card because it is not the best normal summon. It doesn't really start any combos by itself per se. And with the new support, this card is very searchable, so there's no need to be playing any more than one copy of this card. But that's it for our Mimighoul main deck monsters. Now let's get onto our spell and traps. There is a field spell, so we're on one copy of Terraforming, of course. We're on triple copies of Mimighoul Dungeon. This card's an amazing floodgate for this deck. Mimighoul monsters you control that were not normal or special summon this turn gain attack equal to their original defense. Any player who controls a face-down monster cannot normal summon monsters, nor declare an attack with monsters that were special summoned this turn. During your main phase, you can add one Mimighoul monster from our deck or our graveyard to our hand, and we can use this effect of Mimighoul Dungeon once per turn. Not only is it a constant resource generator functionally, either getting cards from our graveyard or from our deck to our hand every single turn, not only does it buff all of our monsters, but it's also a floodgate for our opponent, both from normal summoning and from attacking with special summon monsters, meaning our Mimighouls are going to be sticking around for a long time if they do not get out of the dungeon. And our other Mimighoul spell is going to be triple copies of Mimighoul Maker. Reveal 2 flip monsters with different names from our deck. Our opponent randomly picks one for us to special summon to their side of the field in face down defense position, and we get to add the other to our hand. Then we can special summon a Mimighoul monster from our hand, and if our opponent special summons a monster except in the damage step, we can banish this card from our graveyard, target one face down monster our opponent controls, and then flip it up. We can use each effect of Maker once per turn and only once per turn. This card is fantastic with the new support. This is the main card we are ideally going to be adding with Dragon if we don't have it already, where we're able to summon one monster to our opponent's side of the field. Ideally, it's going to be a copy of Slime. And then we are just going to be like adding, specialing, taking it back, and then just going off to the races. So this card is fantastic, and I do not believe you can play any less than 3 copies of this card. We're also on 2 copies of Mimighoul Room, the trap card in the deck, special summoning a Mimighoul monster from our hand or our deck to our field and face down defense position, or to our opponent's field, and then we can change one face up monster on the field to face down defense position. We can banish this card from our graveyard, target any number of Mimighoul cards we control, and then bounce them to the hand, and we can use one Mimighoul Room effect per turn, and only once that turn. Fantastic card, being able to put another Mimighoul on our opponent's side of the field, flip up Mimighouls or flip down things. It's just a fantastic card, and I think you do kind of have to include it in the deck, unfortunately. For our generic staple cards, we have 19 of them, a lot of non-engine in this deck. We're on 1 Prosp, triple Thrust. Thrust and Tactics are a lot better in this deck, because once we flip up our Mimighouls on our first turn, we're able to immediately go Thrust or Tactics in order to get a lot of advantage. And this is one of the ways that we can get to Room if we wanted to search something else other than Room with Dragon. Very fantastic interaction there. 1 copy of Talents, of course. 1 copy of Called by the Grave for hand trap mitigation. We're also playing Triple Dimension Shifter. This is going to be personal preference. This card is pretty good right now. It's not really fantastic against Malice, although it does fuck up some of their combos, as well as it's all right against Ryzeal. If they're playing the Fiendsmith or the Mitsurugi build, it's a lot better. But this card in here is specifically to fuck up a lot of rogue decks. There are some rogue decks that just kind of hose Mimighoul, and so Shifter is here to kind of help out with that a little bit. So we are on triple Shifter. Of course, it does get turned off the moment a card goes to the graveyard, and there is a little bit of negative synergy here, where because we are including cards like Shifter, if we are currently under Shifter, we cannot Veiler and we cannot Ogre. So you do want to keep that in mind while you're playing and when deciding how you want to be playing this deck in your play patterns. So keep that in mind. We're also on triple copies of Ash Blossom, triple copies of Ghost Mourner, triple copies of Veiler, and 1 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. In our extra deck, we are on 2 copies of Mimighoul Throne. It's 2 level 1 Mimighoul monsters. We can attach 1 material from this card, special summon a Mimighoul Master from our hand, deck, or graveyard. During the main phase, quick effect, we can target 1 Mimighoul Master we control. Equip this card to it as an equip spell. That gives 1000 attack. Then you can return cards from the field to the hand up to the number of materials this card had. We can use 1 Mimighoul Throne effect per turn and only once that turn. This is the main way we're getting Master to our side of the field, and it turns it into a bounce, which is fantastic. And then our other Mimighoul Xyz is Giant Mimighoul, and he's 2 level 1 monsters. Your non-Xyz Mimighouls can attack directly while your opponent controls a face-down monster. So it makes him kind of like Ghostrix. And we can use each of the following effects of Giant Mimighoul once per turn. If this card's XC summon, you can add one Mimighoul card from your deck to your hand. You can attach one material from this card, target face-up cards on the field up to the number of face-down monsters your opponent controls, and destroy them. If you do, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent for each card destroyed. Why does this card have burn on it? I have absolutely no clue, but isn't that why they banned that Fiendsmith Lacrima card? Oh well, you know. What do I know? What do I know? But now let's talk about our generic cards. We're on Zeus, of course, Ghostrix Duelahand, Downward Magician. We're on Fuko, Assembled Nightingale, and Assam Blue Robin, because this is a generic. And then for links, we're on Anima, IP, SP, and Nightmare Unicorn, and Access Code Talker. In our cards that we can opt to include, we could always include Superstar Flare, Typhon Sky Crisis, or additional copies of Triple Tactics Talents, of course. And if we were to take these out of the list, you will see, of course, that the list is about 95-56, again, give or take at this current moment. But that's enough yapping about these spooky guys. Let's get on to the next deck. This next deck is a deck that got a lot of support in the latest set, which is Soul Tenyi. And I don't know if it's more Sword Soul or more Tenyi at this point, to be completely honest with you all. But this deck has gotten a lot of fantastic support, so let's cover this deck right now. The deck is about 150 currently. We have about 50 in the side. It's a little over 100, I believe, but, you know, there's got to be a little bit of wiggle room. And starting off our list, we're on Triple Ecclesia, able to grab our Sword Souls out of deck, and if our opponent controls more monsters than we do, we can special summon for hand from free. 2 through triple copies of Moye. If it's normal or special, we can reveal a Sword Soul or a Worm in hand, making a token. Once we have the tokens on board, we can only Synchro Summon. And if it's sent to the graveyard as Synchro Material, we get to draw 1 card. We're on triple copies of Long Wand. We can discard a Sword Soul or other Worm monster to special summon this card from our hand, and then special summon a Sword Soul token. All the tokens on field, we can only summon Synchros. And then if it's sent to the graveyard as Synchro Material, we can inflict 1,200 damage to your opponent. It's just like Lacrima. And then we're on double copies of Taya. We can banish a Sword Soul or a Worm monster from our graveyard to summon a token. If it's used as Synchro Material and sent to the graveyard, we can send a Sword Soul or a Worm from our deck to the graveyard, which is great synergy with the Tenyis that all, you know, do stuff in the graveyard. We're also on 1 copy of Arch Nemesis Protos, since this card is a lot cheaper now that it's gotten reprinted in Bonanza. 1 copy of Sword Soul Emergence. This is one of the cards that you, of course, can upgrade in numbers if you wanted to increase the budget of this deck a little bit. This is just here in order to be a search target for our Yugioh. However, again, if you wanted to include more at your discretion, because this card is a little bit of money and it does kind of push this deck over the edge a little bit in terms of price. So I did opt to cut some copies of this for copies of Heavenly Dragon Circle. So you can, you know, swap these for these if you wanted to spend a little bit more. 1 copy of Sword Soul Blackout, which is their copy of Icarus Attack, and then 1 copy of Called by the Grave, Hand Traps, Triple Veiler, Triple Ghost Mourner. We are trying to be a little bit cheap with the hand traps with this deck, so no Ash, no Imperm. So again, another if you wanted to include there, they're right here for you. And then for our Tenyis, we're on triple copies of the new card, Tenyi Spirit Tsuruya. It's Tsuruya, oh my god. If you control a Worm monster or a face-up non-effect monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material from a Worm Synchro monster, you can special summon a Tenyi Link monster from your extra deck. When a combo cannot be used as Link material, then you lose life points equal to its Link rating times 1,000. This card is absolutely fantastic in this deck. It is free extender. If your Moye gets negated, if your Moye gets Imperm, you can get your girl out. And you can save both of them. You can save both your girl and your Moye. And you can make a Yugioh, trigger your Tsuruya, trigger your Yugioh, trigger your Moye, draw a card, search a card, and then get a free Tenyi Link right onto your side of the field. It is a fantastic card, and I think this deck is actually going to see some play now with this new card, as well as all the other new Tenyi cards. Speaking of Tenyi cards, we're on triple copies of Vishuda, allowing us to bounce cards from the field, triple copies of Vishana, allowing us to special summon a Tenyi from our deck, triple copies of Adhara, allowing us to add Tenyis back from our banish zone, and 1 Shithana and 1 Mapura, which gives us effects based on when our non-effect monsters are interacted with our opponent.
For our Tenyi spells, we're on 1 Tenyi Infinity. When this card's activated, we can add a Vessel for the Dragon Cycle or a Heavenly Dragon Circle from our deck to our hand. We contribute 1 Worm monster, then target 1 monster on the field and destroy it. We can only use this effect of Tenyi Infinity once per turn. Once per turn during our end phase, we can send this card to the graveyard, and if you do, place 1 Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi from our deck or graveyard face up on your field zone. And you can only activate 1 Tenyi Infinity per turn. Fantastic card. It actually merits running the other field spell now in this deck. So I think this card's fantastic. The popping effect is great. It's just an overall fantastic card. We're also on the 1 copy of Vessel for the Dragon Cycle, sending a Worm monster from our deck to the graveyard. Then if we control a face-up non-effect monster, we can add from our deck to our hand 1 Tenyi monster with a different name than the monster we chose to send. And we can use activate 1 Vessel of the Dragon Cycle per turn. So either it's Foolish or it's Foolish and Rhoda. Good card. And we're on triple copies of Heavenly Dragon Circle. Again, if you don't want to play this many copies, take out 2 and put in 2 Swordsoul Emergence. It will make the deck a little bit more expensive, but it'll be better. This is a quick play spell. Tribute 1 Worm monster, add 1 Worm monster from your deck to your hand, or if you tribute a non-effect monster to activate this card, you can special summon it instead, but negates effects. During our main phase, we control a face of non-effect monster, we can banish this card from our graveyard, add 1 Tenyi card from our deck to our hand, and we can use 1 Heavenly Dragon Circle effect per turn, and only once that turn. It's a pretty damn good card, allows us to dodge effect negation, allows us to bring out a body on board. The main issue is it's a little bit, it's not as impactful as you would really like it to be. So this card is cuttable. I would recommend running 1 copy, of course, since this card is searchable with Tenyi Infinity. So do keep this card at the back of your mind, and it was played in early Swordsoul builds. So this is a card that you could, of course, play around with. And then the field spell that was mentioned on Tenyi Infinity, Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi. All non-effect monsters on the field are unaffected by monster effects. Once per turn, if your opponent special summons an effect monster while you control a face-down monster or a non-effect monster, draw 2 cards. It is just Pot of Greed. This card's a lot better if you're playing more hand traps in the list. So it's better for playing the Ashes, the Imperms, like if we're choosing to play cards like Bell, Ogre, stuff like that. So this card is going to get a lot better depending on how you change up your non-engine ratios in your deck. So this is a card you can play around with. But that's it for our main deck, a nice solid 40. Now let's get to our extra. For our Tenyis, we're on Triple Monk. It's a non-effect monster. We're on 1 Shaman of the Tenyi, which can bring back monsters, but then Tenyi locks us, and also can pop cards when attack is being declared with a non-effect monster. And then the main card we're going to be cheating out with our Saruya, being a Tenyi Spirit Sasahara. It needs 2+ worms, although we're always going to be cheating out. While you control a face-up non-effect monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot target effect monsters for attacks or with card effects. Quick effect, we can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls, special summon a Tenyi Spirit token with its stats, and we can only use that effect of Sasahara once per turn. It makes non-effect monsters, it protects all your non-effect monsters, it's a fantastic card, and it makes big-ass beaters. It's also a 3k body, so it's a very good card. And then for our synchros, we're on 1 copy of Yazi, 1 copy of Baxia, 1 copy of Dragite for spell negates, 1 copy of Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. Do keep in mind this can adapt twice, so it's pretty good for OTKs. 1 copy of a new card, Tenyi Spirit Mula Adhara. It needs 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner monster. If this card is synchro summoned, 2 or more worm monsters are in your graveyard or in banishment. It is just Ancient Fairy Dragon. Add a field spell from your deck to your hand. You can use each effective Tenyi Mula Adhara once per turn. While a non-effect monster is face up on the field, this card gains these effects, cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and cannot be targeted with card effects. The targeting is a little bit extra, since most of the time, if you are having a non-effect monster on your side of the field, it's a token from this card. However, it still protects itself by being destroyed, so it's not like the worst in the world. We're also on 2 copies of Shizhao. It needs a tuner and a non-tuner worm. If it's synchro summoned, we can add to our hand or banish a Swordsoul card from our deck. Quick effect, we can banish 1 Swordsoul card or 1 worm monster from our hand or graveyard, target 1 other effect monster in the field, negate its effects until the end of the turn. We can use 1 Grandmaster Shizhao effect per turn and only once that turn. It's negation, it searches the card, it starts our combo, it's just fantastic overall. For our other Swordsoul cards, we're also on 1 Shijing Long Wan. When it's synchro summoned, you control another worm monster. While this card's on the field, you can draw 1 card. If you synchro summon another worm monster while this is on the field, we can draw a card. If your opponent special summons a monster, we can banish one of those monsters, and if we do, inflict 1200. When your opponent activates a spell, trap card, or effect, quick effect, we can banish that card, and if we do, inflict 1200 damage to your opponent. Very powerful card. A couple downsides. Doesn't really do too much, although it does remove a monster. But again, it doesn't really do all too much. One copy of Chungus. For each banished card, this card gains 1,000 attack and defense. Monsters your opponent controls lose 100 attack and defense. Sorry, not 1,000, 100. If this card would be destroyed by a card effect, we can banish one card from our graveyard instead. If a card is banished, you can banish one card from both our opponent's field and graveyard. Non-targeting, non-destruction removal. Fantastic. And we can only use that effect of changing once per turn. And then our last card is Ready Rose Dragon, which just banishes all cards in the graveyard. Which is, it's a neat card. It's good against Fiendsmith because they have the continuous recursion and this cuts them off from that. But it's not the best in the world, and you could replace it for whatever synchro you'd like in the slot, to be completely honest. Even replace it with like a Link or something, you know? It's just a extra card that was cheap and can have corner situations, so I decided to include it in this list. Cards you can include in this list, of course, to increase the price: Ash, Imperm, Thrust, Talents, you know, the non-engine staples. This deck doesn't honestly have a whole lot of non-engine. We're basically only running about like 6, Called By, and then the hand traps. So if you wanted to increase that non-engine a bit, that would probably serve the deck a little bit better. It wouldn't serve the price a lot better, you know. But that's the end of this one. Now let's get on to our second to last one. For our second to last list, I have brought to you all goblins. I love these little gobos. I know you all like these little gobos, so let's get into these rank 3 and rank 6 little fiends. Starting with Goblin Bikers Gone Wild. We control no monsters, or all monsters are goblins. We can normal summon this card without attributing. We can use each of the following effects of Gone Wild once per turn. If it's normal or special summon, we can special summon a level 4 lower goblin from our deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard, we can target one card in the field and attach it to one of our Goblin XC's monsters we control. Fantastic card. We are playing 3 copies. If we wanted to play like other engines in this deck, we could cut this down to 2 copies, but this is a really powerful card. We're also on triple copies of Goblin Biker Doug Charger. If it's in our hand, we can attach an XC's monster material from a monster on either field, not just our field. You can detach off of Ryzeal cards as well, which is pretty good. If you do special summon this card, if this card's normal or special summon, we can add a Goblin Biker spell or trap from our deck to our hand, and we can lose each effect of Doug once per turn. Fantastic card, one of our better starters in the list. All of our other goblins aren't really that great, and so we're only playing 1 copy of each of them. So being 1 copy of Goblin Biker Clatter Sploder, on normal or special, we can target a goblin in our graveyard except for itself, special summon it, and during our opponent's main phase, if it's in our graveyard, quick effect, we can attach a material from one of their monsters. And if we do, special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. That doesn't just mean their monsters, we can also detach it from our monsters, because our monsters do have effects when the cards are detached. Although, if we are against an XC's deck, we're more than likely going to be detaching off of their monsters. 1 copy of Mean the Merciless. On normal or special, we can special summon a goblin from our hand except for itself. During our main phase, if this card's in our graveyard, we can attach a material from an XC's on either field. And if we do, special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field, and we can use each effect of Mean the Merciless once per turn. This one's not really that great. Like, Clatter Sploder is a lot better since it's a quick effect, so we can do it a lot more proactively. However, this is something. Like, it's not the worst. And 1 copy of Goblin Biker Boom Mock. Once per chain during the main phase of this card's in our hand or graveyard, quick effect, attach an XC's material from a monster on either field, and if you do, special summon this card. You cannot special summon Goblin Biker Boom Mock until the end of the turn. So it's a once per turn summon, it's a quick effect attach, once per chain. It's pretty alright. Now onto our Goblin Biker spell and traps. We're on triple copies of Grand Entrance, either adding a goblin from our deck to our hand, then we can apply the following effects. Detach an XC's monster from either field, and if we do, special summon a goblin from our hand. Or we can banish this card from our graveyard to detach an XC's material from a monster on either field, then adding a goblin from our graveyard back to our hand. Fantastic card all around. It's also a thrust target if that's a card we want to include in the list, as you can see it over here. We're also on triple copies of Goblin Biker Grand Breakout. Tribute 1 monster, special summoning a goblin monster from our deck, but it cannot attack this turn. When a monster declares an attack, you can banish this card from our graveyard to attach any number of materials from Goblin XC's monsters you control. All monsters our opponent currently controls lose 1,000 attack for each material detached until the end of the turn. That typically doesn't come up, however, it can come up in against decks like Tenpai in some situations if they haven't made the big man. However, the quick effect aspect of this does mean it's really good for dodging spot negation, like Effect Veiler, Imperm, cards like that, as well as it's really good for tributing a Nibiru token for getting your plays started again once you get Nibiru'd. And then our last Goblin Biker spell trap is going to be 1 Goblin Biker Grand Bash, the continuous spell.
Goblin monsters you control gain 300 attack for each goblin monster you control. During your main phase, you can normal summon one goblin monster in addition to your normal summon and set. You can only gain that effect once per turn. You can target 2 goblin monsters you control, then activate one of these effects. Make the level of one monster become the current level of the other, or make both of their levels become their combined original levels. So we can either target a 6 and a 3 and make both of them 3s or both of them 6s, or we can target 2 3s and make both of them 6s. So it gives us options in order to get to our 6 Xyz, so pretty damn good, especially since we are not playing the Fiendsmith cards in this list, since those cards aren't exactly known to be the most budget. And then for our generic extenders, we're on 1 Psychic Tracker, 1 Psychic Wielder, triple copies of Speedroid Terratop, and the 1 Takatomborg, triple copies of Emergency Teleport, and then for our non-engine, we're on 1 Talents, triple Ash Blossom, triple Veiler, double Ghost Mourner, double Nibiru, double Bell, and double Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Very fantastic lineup here, lots of non-engine, and lots of room to be putting whatever you want in there if you don't like the current non-engine cards. Now let's talk about our extra deck. Let's talk about our goblins and then skim over the rest. We're on double copies of Big Gabanga. It needs 2 level 3 monsters. If it's XC summon, we can add a goblin from our main deck to our hand. If a material is detached from a monster on field, excepting the damage step, you can target one face-up monster from the field, accept this card, and attach it to this card as material, which is why detaching during our opponent's turn is so critical. During the end phase, we can attach 1 goblin monster from our deck to this card as material. We can use each effect of Big Gabanga once per turn. This is one of the cards we really want to be ending on, and it's also one of our main points of interaction, which means this card has a little bit of a downside this meta, unfortunately. When cards like Ultimate Slayer are running around for Ryzeal, it works just as good against Goblin, because you Ultimate Slayer, put that Gabanga right the fuck back where it came from, and then they don't really have all too much to be interacting with you with, of course. So that's one downside with the deck, unfortunately. We're also on 1 copy of Goblin's Crazy Beast. It needs 2+ level 6 monsters. Once per turn, quick effect, you can target a spell or trap on the field. Attach 2 materials from a monster on the field. And if you do attach that target to this card as material, if a monster you control be destroyed by a card effect, you can attach 1 material from this card instead, kind of like Dingirsu. And if this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, then attach a Goblin monster from your graveyard, add to it as material, but we can use that last effect once per duel. It's just back row removal and protection. It's not the worst in the world. As well as 1 copy of Goblin Biker's Gone Bonkers. And these 2+ level 6 monsters, we can target face-up monster opponent controls up to the number of goblin monsters that you control. Detach 1 material from a monster you control, and if you do, attach those monsters to this card as material. During your opponent's turn, quick effect, we can target cards our opponent controls up to the number of Goblin Xyz monsters we control. Detach 3 materials from a monster we control, and if we do, send those targeted cards to the graveyard, which is fantastic. And we use each effective Goblin Biker's Gone Bonkers once per turn. And then for our generics, we're on 1 Downard, 1 Zeus, 1 Breaksword for popping cards, 1 Cicada King, 1 Gossip Shadow, and then for links, we're on 1 Anima because we are playing Effect Veiler, so in theory we could make it. 1 copy of Selene, since Anima is a spellcaster, we could, in theory, make this, and then Link Climb. 1 copy of Access Code Talker, a payoff to Link Climb into. 1 copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World in order to deal with problematic cards that we don't actually have an out to. 1 copy of Unicorn, and 1 copy of Nightmare Penis. These cards are very flexible, of course, especially the Link monsters. You can pretty much do whatever you want with them. But in our cards that we could include if we had a higher budget, of course, SP Little Knight is a very fantastic generic Link monster that should be in here if you have the budget for it, or just have it laying around. Infinite Impermanence, again, there's a fantastic hand trap this format. Triple Traptrix Thrust, and then Typhon Sky Crisis, of course. These are just fantastic generics, and they can pretty much go in any deck this format. But that's enough messing around with goblins. Now let's get on to our 5th and final deck list. And then for our last deck profile, we're going to be talking about Sulfachord. Wait. What do you mean? What do you mean we're not talking about Sulfachord? Oh, the other music archetype? Okay. Well, let me try that again. Alrighty, so now for our last archetype, we're talking about the Jinn archetype. Wait. What do you mean we're not talking about? You said the music archetype. This is the not the pendulum one. So the Sulfachords are the pendulum one. Oh, the other music pendulum archetype. Okay, I gotcha. Okay, so for our last deck, we're going to be covering Symphonic Warrior, one of my favorite
music-based pendulum arc. What do you mean we're not talking about Symphonic Warrior? What other music pendulum archetype is there? Oh, that one. Okay, and then for our last deck, we are going to be covering Melodious. Sorry about that, y'all. I got a little bit mixed up. You know how it be. This is one of the older archetypes that came from Arc V, I believe. And this is a pendulum fusion archetype. It's a little bit all over the place, but I think it's really neat, and it's also very, very budget. So let's cover the archetype now. We're on triple copies of Couplet. This is a newer card, the Melodious Songstress. While it's in scale, we cannot pendulum summon except for light monsters. This effect cannot be negated. If you not control any face-up monster other than Melodious monsters, you can add one Melodious spell or trap from our deck to our hand, and use each effective couplet once per turn. If this card is added to your hand except for drawing it for your normal draw step, you can reveal this card, special summon one level 4 or lower Melodious monster from our hand or our graveyard, so it cannot special summon itself since it is level 5. If a Melodious fusion monster is special summoned to your field while this card's in the face-up extra deck, except in a damage step, you can place this card in your pendulum zone. Very fantastic card effect since it will just rescale itself if it's used as fusion material itself. And it's just overall a fantastic card, and you should be playing 3 copies of it in all your Melodious decks, as of right now, of course. We're also on triple copies of Refrain, the Melodious Songstress. In scale, we can target a Melodious fusion you control, send a Melodious monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, the targeted monster gains attack equal to the level of the monster sent to the graveyard times 200 until the end of this turn. You can use that effective Refrain once per turn. It's good for buffing up our Melodiouses to make them even bigger. Not really a hugely critical effect though. And on normal or special, we can add a Melodious monster from our deck to our hand except for itself. If a Melodious fusion monster is special summoned to your field while this face-up card is in your extra deck, except in damage step, you can place this card in your pendulum zone. So you can kind of see the idea. You scale Couplet, you scale Refrain, you add a card with Couplet, you fusion summon, you just rescale them. You kind of get the point. Or we can normal summon Refrain, add Couplet, special summon a card with Couplet, scale Couplet, add a card, fusion summon like that. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. And then we're also on triple copies of Sonata, the Melodious Diva. This is just a freebie. If you control Melodious monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, completely free. While the special summon monster is on the field, all fairy type monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense. A good way to push for lethal. We're also on 2 copies of Soprano, the Melodious Songstress, level 4. While this card is special summon, you can target one Melodious monster in our graveyard except for Soprano and add it to your hand. That effect is a once per turn. And we can, not once per turn, that first effect is a hard once per turn. The second effect is not a hard once per turn. Second effect being once per turn, you can fusion summon one Melodious fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control as fusion materials, including this card. Fantastic card overall. We're playing multiple of this card because we are wanting to see this card as frequently as possible, and we don't want to instantly collapse in the face of a Bestial, so we are playing multiple. For our one-ofs, we're on 1 copy of Canon, the Melodious Diva. If we control Melodious, we can special summon this card from our hand. We only special summon this card once per turn, unlike our Sonata. And this card reads, once per turn you can target Melodious monster you control, changes the battle position. Huge effect. Not really. The most this can really come up in terms of changing your Melodious battle positions is if one of your Melodious gets like Book of Moon, you know? Like this can flip it back face up, so interesting there. 1 copy of Aria, the Melodious Diva. While this card is special summon, while this special summon card is on the field, Melodious monsters you control cannot be targeted by card effects or destroyed by battle. Fantastic end piece card. You're just going to be special summoning this card to your field and ending your board with this and all your other things, and they all can't be destroyed by battle or card effect. So, fantastic stuff there. Sorry, not destroyed by card effect, targeted with card effect, which is better because they can't SP your stuff. 1 copy of Shapina, the Melodious Maestra. Once per turn, you can target 1 light fairy monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You cannot activate non-light monster effects during the turn you've activated this card, or did this effect. It's a little bit strange, but we do have to play it. And then for our spells, which is one of the main reasons we playing this deck, is triple copies of Ostinato. If you control no monsters, fusion summon 1 Melodious fusion monster from your extra deck using 2 monsters from your hand and or deck as material. During the end phase of this turn, destroy the monster fusion summoned by this effect, and if you do, all materials that were used for its fusion summon are in your graveyard, you can special summon them back to your side of the field. Do you see a once per turn anywhere on this card? There is no once per turn on this card. If they ash it and you have a way to get into another one, or you just have the other one, you can just drop that thing. This card is fantastic. You cannot be playing this deck with any less than 3 copies of this card. It's amazing.
Another card that we're playing 3 copies of is 3 copies of First Movement Solo. If you control no monster, special summon a level 4 or lower Melodious monster from our hand or deck. We can only use 1 First Movement Solo per turn. We can not special summon monsters the turn we activate this card, except for Melodious monsters. A little bit of like an iffy last requirement where we're locked into Melodious for the rest of the turn, although it is pretty worth it since it's one of our best Melodious extenders, being an E-Telly for Melodious functionally. And then for our last Melodious card, we're on 1 copy of Melodious Concerto, fusion summoning 1 fairy fusion monster from our extra deck using monsters from our hand, field, and or pendulum zones. If a Melodious fusion monster is sent to your graveyard while this card's in your graveyard, even during a damage step, you can place this card on the bottom of your deck, then draw a card, so it's great recycling. And then we're on generics of triple Traptrix Thrust, 3 copies of that, 1 Talents, 1 Called By, 1 Prosp, triple Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, triple Infinite Impermanence, triple Effect Veiler, double Ghost Bell, 1 Ghost Ogre, and 1 copy of Herald of the Orange Light. You could, of course, bump up that Herald of the Orange Light if you would like to. However, that does increase the deck. So if you were to do that, I would say do it something like this. It does increase the price of the deck, but not a huge amount. It kind of just, again, depends on what you're trying to do with the deck per se, you know? And that's it for the main deck. Now let's cover the extra deck, specifically our Melodious Fusions.
I don't mean to interrupt the video, but I do just want to give you all guys a heads up. We are quickly rising in our subscriber number, and I did want to make you all aware that once we hit 2,000 subscribers, I am going to be doing another giveaway. Now, I remember I did one once we hit 500 subscribers, and we did a special thing for 1,000, so I want to do something special for 2,000. And you see this beautiful mat right here? Well, it can be yours. I have 2 extra mats. There's one of them. And let me get that second one for y'all. I have 2 extra pristine mats for you all. So I got multiple of these. And to 2 lucky winners, I'm going to be giving 1 to one person and 1 to another. And the person who wins the overall giveaway is also going to get a full Orcust deck. I can't guarantee it's going to be max rarity, but I'm going to see what I can do. And I'm going to try and make it look nice and pretty for you. It's not going to be the full deck. It's just going to be the core Orcust cards. But I want to be able to give you one of you all the ability to play one of my favorite decks. So just something I'm doing for you. You can always pop into our Discord. I believe that's where I'm going to be doing the giveaway. The Discord's always going to be in the description of my videos. I'm going to have a little bit more details once we start rolling up on that, but I just wanted to make you all aware of that. Now, back to the video.
We're on triple copies of Baka, the Melodious Maestra. These 2 Melodious monsters. While you control this fusion summon card, the activated effects of your Melodious fusion monsters cannot be negated. Activated effects cannot be negated. Keep in mind, if you get impermed, if you get veilered, those effects will still be negated. So keep that in mind. So just don't be thinking this is just protecting you forever. You can use each of the following effects of Baka once per turn. If this card is special summoned, you can special summon a Melodious monster from our deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a Melodious in your graveyard except for Baka and special summon it in defense position. Fantastic card. On specialing from deck, when it's sent to the graveyard for anything, just bring a card back. Amazing value. As well as triple copies of Schuberta, the Melodious Maestra. 2 Melodious monsters, once while face up on the field, kind of like Baron. Quick effect, target up to 3 cards in any graveyards, banish them, and if you do, this card gains 200 attack for each. I mean, triple DD Crow, anytime, is really strong, especially in a format where Fiendsmith is pretty strong, so we're going to be playing 3 copies of this card because this is one of the best cards we can go into. We're on 2 copies of Flowering Etoile, the Melodious Magnificat. This card needs a Melodious Maestra, which is why we are playing this in the main deck. And 2 Melodious monsters. Quick effect, banish until the end phase any number of Melodious monsters we control. Then we can return up to that many face-up cards our opponent controls to the hand. We can use that this effect of Flowering Etoile, the Melodious Magnificat, once per turn. Once per turn, if this card is fusion summoned in the owner's control leaves the field because an opponent's card, we can special summon 1 Melodious from our deck or extra except for itself. And that's it. It's just a really powerful card. This is one of the cards we want to be ending our board on. Ideally, when we're ending our board, we want this, and this on the board all at the same time in order to make it a royal pain in the ass for our opponent to really do anything. And then our last Melodious is 1 copy of Balloon Diva, the Melodious Choir. Choir, not Choir. Needs a Melodious, a Maestra. Again,
that's why we're running this. Plus a Melodious monster cannot be destroyed by a battle or card effect. You take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. If this battles a special summon monster after damage calc, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the difference between that original attack and this card, and if you destroy that opponent's monster. It's a fantastic card. It's a weird way to word that effect, although it does mean it basically wins combat almost all the time, which is why we are including it in the list. For the rest of the cards in our list, we're on one copy of Haggard Lizard Dose in order to get cards off our side of the field to free up our Ostinato when we're going second. One copy of Espinous Little Knight, one copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, and one copy of Bloom Harmonious, the Melodious Composer. They do actually have a link. It needs 2 fairies. If this card is link summoned, we can discard a card, special summon 2 Melodious monsters with different levels from our deck to zones this card points to in defense position, and then we're locked out of special summoning the turn we activate the effect, except for Melodious monsters. We only that effect of Bloom Harmonist once per turn. The Melodious monster this card points to attacks, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. Pretty decent card. It's a good flex card to go into when we do choose to go into it, although we're not going to be going into it all the time, but I do think this card needs to be included in the list. And then of course our last 2 cards is one copy of Dugaris in order to draw a couple more cards, and one copy of our Terribly Tired Boy in order to gunk up board states. For our cards that we can include, if we do opt to include more cards, of course Dominus Purge. We are a light deck, so Dominus Purge slots right in fantastically if you were to include it. Cut the ashes, put the purges in. And then of course Typhon Sky Crisis. If you were to include this card, probably cutting either Dugaris or one of the Joubert does to include it would be sufficient. But that's going to be about it for the end for this video. Thank you all so much for watching to the end if you did. If you want to become a member, stay tuned to the end of the video to find out. And thank you to my current member. Thank you, Ari. And again, I'll be seeing you all later. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or 2 before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.